I am the greatest.
I'm a goat, I'm that goat. I'm an undisputed goat. I suggest you take notes. I'm the G-O-A-T. You better stand back in line. I'm undefeated even if it's just in my mind. I'm a goat, I'm that goat. I'm an undisputed goat. I suggest you take notes. I'm the G-O-A-T. You better stand back in line. I'm undefeated even if it's just in my mind. Gotta put in work, gotta put in work. Get it on the grind, get it on the grind. Ain't nothing easy, ain't nothing easy. Starts in your mind, starts in your mind. From the pyramid to electricity, to electricity. It's hard to get to woke, it's hard to get to woke. It's hard to get to free, it's hard to get to free. It's easy to give in, it's easy to give in. It's easy to be lazy, it's easy to be lazy. Gotta go for your dreams.
Hey, good morning, good morning. Welcome to the Political Goat TPG. Good morning, happy Sunday. What's up? What's up? Welcome to the Political Goat, where we bring you big politics from the Black perspective, bringing you that good political game early on a Sunday morning. Thanks for tuning in. I am your host, Chris Larson. I am reporting live from sunny Sacramento, California. Hope your Sunday morning is going well. How are you? In the chat, let us know how you doing this early Sunday morning. Don't forget also to like and share and subscribe to this channel and to this video. Watch all of our latest episodes at TPG, The Political Goat, on ETM Media Group, on YouTube. And of course, don't forget that we also do a show on Tuesdays at 9 p.m. Pacific time called Community Call-In, right here on ETM Media. So make sure you check us out on Tuesdays at 9 p.m. Come right back this direction, and we will be talking more and more and more. Today's topic on The Political Go, we are doing a recall recap, or a total recall recap. As you know, California had its recall election for governor last week, and today we'll be talking about what actually happened. Right? Like what actually happened in the recall. Yes, I think we know like the results, but like let's take a deeper dive. Let's actually look at what actually happened during the recall. We'll also look at recalls as a form of holding politicians what we call accountable, right? Accountable. We use this word a lot, this phrase a lot. We're gonna hold these people accountable. We're gonna hold these people accountable. But what does that actually mean? What does holding a politician or a government official accountable actually mean, like specifically? And what are some ways to hold politicians accountable and government officials accountable as we talk about recalls, right? And how does the recall fit into that? So why do you care about this though, right? Why is this actually important? Well, it's important for a few different reasons. One, it's important that we actually take a look at what actually happened during the election this week, and any election really, because we get to see how the stuff that we thought was going to happen matches up with actually what really happened, right? And then it's also important to think about what actually happened in the recall, again, as a way to think about accountability, right? And what does accountability mean? This is really, really important because we're coming up towards some more elections and some more things in politics coming up next year, right? And so we want to be thinking about what does accountability mean, political accountability mean, as we have an example of it this week in the recall election. Questions for you before we jump into our 3 rounds. The questions for you today are, one, what does it mean actually to you? What does holding a politician accountable or a government official accountable mean to you specifically? And then what are some ways to hold politicians and government officials accountable? Again, don't forget, like, share, and subscribe to TPG. You are right here at TPG right now, The Political Goat. So like, share, and subscribe. And also, don't forget again to watch all of our latest episodes. All right, let's recap this recall. Round 1.
Round 1.
All right, so Round one. California, as you know, officially had its governor recall election this weekend. It's not too big of a surprise that that Governor Gavin Newsom, governor of California, won and kept his seat with about almost 65% of California voters saying that they want to keep him as governor, that they do not want to remove him as the governor. I'm actually going to share my screen here because I want to take a look at some of the latest polls, the polls that were actually, the latest polls that we had before the actual election day, which was last Tuesday, and then take a look at that and see how they compare to what actually happened on election day. So I think we looked at this. We probably didn't look at this on TPG, but I'm sure we looked at it on the community call-in show. By the way, shout out to Umoya and Kim, who are working the ones and twos right now on the Political Go. They also hosted an amazing watch party for the California recall election. So if you didn't see the watch party that we did last week around the recall, please check it out right here on ETM Media. And also big shout out to CO, our fellow colleague who helped us do the recall watch party. So we looked at this graph, we looked at this set of polls, and these are really polling averages. And they just told us how California people who were polled thought about keeping or removing Gavin Newsom over the last, let's say, 3 months. And as you can see, the two lines sort of, came up together, met, and then sort of split back apart. On the top, that blue purple line are people who said in the poll that they want to keep the governor, and the orangey type red orange line at the bottom are those who said they wanted to remove the governor. So at the last day, right before the election, the polls told us that 57% basically of California voters, or 57% of people polled, said that they would be voting to, or that they wanted to keep the governor, and 41% said that they wanted to remove the governor. So that's where we were right before the election, the day of, or the day right before the election. How did it actually turn out, though? Right. So let's look at how it actually turned out and how it actually compares to what the poll said. So it turns out that the polls were wrong. The polls were wrong, but not in the usual way that we think polls are wrong. Gavin Newsom actually did better, it looks like, than what the polls said he was going to do. Some 64% of California voters said that they want to keep Gavin Newsom. That's higher than the 57% that was predicted, or at least expected, or could be expected by the poll averages leading up to the day to vote. So the polls are wrong. In this case, the candidate, Gavin Newsom, actually did way, way better, or at least 10 points better or so than, as much as 10 points better than what the polls expected, or the poll averages said. And the people who were voting for the recall, voting to remove the governor, actually did a little bit worse than was expected, right? The people who wanted to remove the governor got about 35% of the vote, and that's less than the 40 or so percent that was expected in the polls leading up to the last day to vote. So this is how it actually happened versus what we thought was going to happen. And again, these polls were off, but they were off in a way that we usually don't think of polls being off, right? We usually think of polls being off, to the other way, or the other side. But in this case, the poll said that Newsom was going to do so well, and he did actually better than was expected. So that's important to keep in mind as we look into some of the other recall numbers. And we didn't have any have any specific predictions or thoughts before the election, at least that I saw, about how the vote would break down by gender, by race, by something else. So we're actually going to look at some of that breakdown right now. We're going to look at how men versus women voted. We're going to look at how the different races and ethnicities in California voted as well. And then we're going to take a closer look at specifically the Black vote in particular, because I want to focus on that specifically for you and drill that down and break that down in round two. So let's take a quick look at how the vote broke down by gender. So just easy way to think about this, right? In California, there are half or so of the population is male, half or so of the population is female. It's very, very close, right? And these are people who identify as male, right? And these are people who identify as female. So how did the vote actually break down? 44% of all the males in California, 44% of all the males in California who voted said that they wanted to vote to remove the governor. So they voted yes to remove the governor, whereas 56%, or more than half of the men who voted in the recall election, said that they want to keep the governor. So it's 56-44, keep the governor for men. For the people who identify as females, 64% said that they wanted to keep our governor, Gavin Newsom, so they voted no. And about 36% said that they wanted to remove the governor. So it was 64-36 female and 56-44 men. As you can see right there, of the men and women who voted, more women were willing to keep the governor than men. In both groups, more than half said that they wanted to keep the governor, but it was closer for the men, and it was not as close for the people who identified as women or females. About 1 in 2 or so men said, keep the governor, so about half, and then about 2 in 3 said that they wanted to keep the governor for women who voted in the recall election last week. Let's take a look at some of the racial breakdown, and then I'm gonna skip a little bit around the Black voter numbers because I want to talk about that specifically in round two. But let's look at the rest of the state, right? So among white voters, which are about white people in the state, white people in the state, I think are about 56% of the state. So of the white voters, we had about 59% say that they want to keep the governor, and about 41% say that they want to remove the governor. So more than half, almost 2/3 of all white voters said that they wanted to keep Gavin Newsom, whereas about 40% of white voters said that they wanted to remove the governor. I'm going to skip over the Black numbers there because I want to come back to that. But as you can see, in the yellow there and the orange and blue for the Hispanic/Latino vote, about 60% of Latinos said that they wanted to keep the governor, and about 40% said that they wanted to remove the governor. For the Asian population here in the state of California, which, as we know, is a mix of a lot of different groups, but generally speaking, about 64% of voters who identify as Asian said that they wanted to keep the governor, and about 35 or 36% said that they wanted to remove the governor. And there's this other group that we have in California too, which is basically a catch-all for everything else, or non-identifiers, or people who don't identify with one of those specific racial categories. Maybe they have something else. Maybe they don't identify at all. Maybe they didn't, say, right? But for this group, it's actually interesting. 56%, so more than half of this group who identify as other, said that they wanted to remove the governor. They voted yes, and about 44% said that they wanted to keep the governor. So that's the racial breakdown. That's how the numbers looked leading up to the race, and how they fared, and how it actually happened in real life after the vote. And think about this in terms of how we were thinking before the election, right? Were we thinking that there were going to be more Black folks or more Latinos or more Asians who voted to remove the governor versus what we actually saw? I think there was a lot of talk and a lot of I think like alarm bells going off, especially if you were following some of the Newsom no recall campaign folks. I think we were seeing a lot of people or a lot of stories saying, hey, there's a chance that the Latino population or the Asian population or even the white population might be more inclined or might want to remove the governor more based on some of the early numbers, or maybe even some of the early talk that was going on before the election. Did that actually show up in the numbers though? Like, did that actually show up in the actual numbers? And as you can see, 60% of Latinos, some two and three almost, said that they wanted to keep the governor. Same, even higher percentage of the Asian population, some 65%, 64% said that they wanted to keep the governor also. All right, let's jump into round two and let's talk about Black folks. How did we vote in this election? Round two.
Round two.
Round two. All right. So let's talk about Black folks here in the state of California. How did we express ourselves? What did we think about removing or keeping the governor in this last week's recall election? So I think this is actually the number that stuck out most to me from looking at all of this information that came out after the recall election. 83% of Black voters who voted, at least as the numbers that we have now, 83% of the Black voters who voted said that they wanted to keep the governor. 17% said that they wanted to remove the governor. So think about that. That's more of a percentage of the Black voters said that they wanted to keep Gavin Newsom than a percentage of white voters, than the percentage of Hispanic or Latino voters, and the percentage of Asian voters, etc. More people who were Black who voted said that they wanted to keep the governor than any other group who showed up and voted this year, this recall election. And this is important, right? Because think about this in terms of, one, what we're going to be going up into next year as we go into another governor election next year. Remember, the governor of California is up for re-election again in 2022. So again, next year. These recall elections are kind of special elections, so they don't happen in the normal course of the elections, right? They happen for special reasons, and we're going to talk about how you actually get an actual recall election on the ballot in round three. But these are special elections, so there's going to be another governor election right again next year, and Black voters were really, really strong. Actually, the strongest group for the governor broken down by race, and we're going to break it down next by race and sex, or race and gender together. That's next. But if you just look at Black voters, male, female, or people who identify as male versus people who identify as female, all together, 83%. So 8 in 10, okay, of Black people who showed up to vote said that they wanted to keep Gavin Newsom. Now let's break it down a little bit more, and let's look at Black men and let's look at Black women. So how did it break down for Black men and Black women? So according to the info that we have now, and I should have said this in the beginning, and I'm sorry, let me actually say this. These numbers are still being updated. We still have more information coming in. The results of the race will not change the actual results, but this information and how people voted is still subject to change, even though we have, I think, over 80, maybe even 90% of all of the votes in. So let's look at Black men and Black women. So again, we start with 83% of Black voters voting last week to keep Gavin Newsom. Okay? Let's look at how Black men did and how Black women did. So of the Black men who voted, 77% of the Black men, so at least 3 in 4 of the Black men who voted, said that they wanted to keep Gavin Newsom as governor. 23% said that they wanted to remove Gavin Newsom as governor. And if you look at Black women, some 89% of Black women said that they wanted to keep Gavin Newsom as governor versus about 11% who said that they wanted to remove Gavin Newsom as governor. So interesting, right? If you look at the headline top numbers, right, we have 83% saying that they want to keep Gavin Newsom of the Black voters versus, some 20-something percent who said that they wanted to remove Gavin Newsom. But look closer. The numbers are stronger for the governor for Black women, and not as strong, but still very strong for the governor among Black men. There's about if you subtract 89 from 77, you get what, 13 or something like that, 14. My math is horrible here, all right? So please don't, I actually used to be a math tutor, so that's gonna suck. But so some 14%, 14 points, sort of difference between how much black women wanted to keep Gavin Newsom versus how much black men wanted to keep Gavin Newsom. These are just interesting things to look at. It's not something that I think we have a lot of information on in terms of like the whys, but there's no there's no question both black men and black women by at least 77%, and as high as almost 90% said that they wanted to keep Gavin Newsom as governor. So now we have a look at what actually happened versus what was predicted or expected, just sort of generally. We have a look at how the race broke down by gender and also by race. We have a closer look at the actual black vote and how black people voted and how black people thought about keeping the governor. And as you can see, black voters were the strongest voting group by race for Gavin Newsom this year by far. I mean, I don't think there's any group that actually came close, right? I mean, I think the closest group in terms of support to keep the governor was the Asian population, with about 65% saying that they want to keep the governor. So now we have some basic general info. Let's actually take in this last round. Let's take a look at recalls and what does this recall mean, and what do recalls mean specifically for like the black voters who showed up 83+%. What does it mean about accountability, and what does actually accountability, saying accountability, mean? All right, round three.
Round 3.
All right, so round three. Let's talk in this last round about what is accountability and why does it matter to this conversation when we're talking about recalls? Well, I thought we were just going to talk about like what happened. Well, let's actually look at what happened. First of all, what is a recall, right? Now, we talked about this probably in like our first recall show. I know we did one show on this already, but what is a recall? Yes, we know it. It's a way to bring a politician or a government official up for election before their term officially ends. Yes, that is technically what a recall is, right? It's a way to cause an election or start an election before a politician or a government official's term usually ends, right? So it's a way to do it early. Fine, great, we know that. But what does it actually mean if we think about accountability? You hear the words and you hear the phrase accountability a lot, probably, and you're going to hear it more and more, trust me. And I know you were hearing that after the 2020 election and right around the 2020 election, right? It was, we need to hold these politicians accountable. We need to hold, the president accountable, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't think we talk a lot about what that actually means. I think we just say it a lot. But what does accountability actually mean? Let me give you an idea of what it means to me in some ways. So to me, when I hear the word of accountability, I think of another two words. I think of the word consequences, and I think of responsible or responsibility. So when somebody asks me, what does it mean to hold a politician accountable? I automatically think they're asking me, what kind of consequences do I want to see if the politician or government official does something that I don't like? So if the politician or government official does something that I don't like, or does something that is against my community, what are the consequences for them, right? Now, I think a lot of our work politically, and this is generally speaking as a group, as Black folks, I think we think about accountability and consequences around elections a lot, right? Like around the every 2 year or every 4 year elections a lot. So every 2 years, you get a chance to hold a politician accountable. Every 4 years, you get a chance to hold a politician accountable. But that's actually a very, I don't want to say weak way of thinking about it, but it's actually a very weak way of thinking about it, right? Because as you can see, when white folks and other folks get mad at a politician, they don't wait until the next time they get a chance to hold a politician accountable or to impose some consequences on the politician. No, they organize and then they do something called or like a recall, right? And a recall is a way to go past that every 2 year, every 4 year thing. It's a way to say, no, we want to right now, literally right now, we're going to stop you right where you are. It doesn't matter if you have 1 year left, which Gavin Newsom has, 1 year, literally 1 year left, or if you have 5 years left, or if you have 10 years left, right? I'm not sure if there's any office where you can hold it for 10 years, at least elected office, like without having to be like reelected. So, it's whenever there's something going on that we don't like, and in this case, there were a lot of different reasons that people said that they wanted to do this recall. But it's whenever we don't like something enough, we're going to recall you. We're going to hold you accountable. We're going to impose a consequence on you for doing something against the community that we are interested in. So this is important. This is important to add to our toolkit and our tool belt as Black folks, right? And to add to our arsenal of political weapons, and to be thinking about this as a power that real citizens have. This is something that everyday citizens, real citizens, a power that we have. We don't have to wait. We're not stuck with you for 2 years, right? We can break up with you whenever we want. Okay, right? We can, start the divorce proceedings for you whenever we want. Okay, and I want us to think about this, especially us as Black folks here. I want us to think about this and to start to add this to our minds, that this is also a part of the weapons that we have, right? Recalling politicians. Basically, we just said as a state, we just said, listen, the governor has another year left, but do we want to fire him now or not? And do we want to fire him? And who should replace him, right? If he was fired, right? So this is another power that regular, ordinary citizens have to take in their hands, right? And actually do a recall. Now, that doesn't mean that it's easy to actually do a recall, okay? And I actually want to go through a little bit of, and in 1 or 2 minutes here, just a little bit of what it actually takes to start a recall, and then mention a couple of other power weapons or tools that everyday regular citizens have to change their government and influence their government and hold politicians or government officials accountable, aka impose consequences on them for doing things that we don't like. So I'll mention a couple of those. But what does it take to actually get a recall on the ballot here in California? So I'm reading from Ballotpedia right now. And so Ballotpedia, it's a great resource. I would definitely Google it, check it out. Great resource for a lot of different political topics, among others. So don't only use this source, but this is definitely one source that I would have in my list of places that I go to find political information. It's Ballotpedia, kind of like Wikipedia, right? For like, general info. This is Ballotpedia for like political info. So really, really quickly, I'm not going to read this to you because you can definitely go and Google this yourself. But I did just want to give you an idea of what does it take to recall a state official like a governor. Okay? And by the way, when you read through this, you'll also see that your local officials can be recalled too. So I'm gonna use the word remove or fire instead of recall, because I think it makes more sense, and I think we use those terms more, right? So what does it take to remove or fire a state official, or what does it take to remove or fire a local official? And you have the power. We have the power as citizens to do that at the local and at the state level. One thing that you're going to know is that, or learn, is that recalling politicians at the federal level I think it's either impossible or very, very much harder. So what we're talking about right now is just for the state level and just for the local level. But for federal stuff, we have to come back to that at another time and dig more into that. So what does it take to recall a state official? Here are some of the things that you need to do. So first, the people who want to remove or fire a politician or government official have to file what's called a notice of intent to recall petition. So they have to file a petition, and that petition has to be signed at first by 65 voters, just 65 voters, in order to begin the petition drive process. So there's a petition process that you have to go through in order to get a recall or a removal of your politician or fire your politician started. So there's a petition process. The first thing you need to start that process is a notice of intent with 65 voters who signed it. So that's the first thing, right? But that's not the only thing. Here comes the harder part. For the actual petition, as you can see here, you have to have a lot more signatures than 65. A lot more. And the way that you have to figure out how much signatures you need changes. It's not the same, just a straight number. It changes. So think about that too. Here is the formula that they talk about on Ballotpedia. So for the actual petition, signatures must equal a percentage of the total number of votes most recently cast for the target office. So 12% for executive officials and 20% for state legislators and judges. Put a pin in this point here too. You can also recall judges. Okay, so the judges who are also elected can also be removed or fired before their time is done. Okay, so just put a pin in that too. And in addition to that, so in addition to the 12%, so right now you need 12% of whatever, like however many votes were cast for this, let's say state official. So let's say Gavin Newsom got, 5, let me make it easy for my own math. Let's say Gavin Newsom got 10 million votes last time he was elected in the regular election. So 10 million votes. So then you would need 12% of that vote to actually get on your petition to actually officially start a recall election. So you would need 12% of that. It's 20% if you're talking about like state legislators and judges, like I was saying before. And in addition, your petition has to have signatures from at least each of at least 5 counties equal in number to 1% of the last vote for the office in that county. So that's just a fancy way of saying you have to have signatures from people and voters in at least 5 of the counties that voted for the person that you're trying to recall. So basically, you have to have the votes spread out. And so you have to have a certain number of signatures, and you have to have those votes sort of spread out without getting into the complicated math here. So I want to stop there because that's enough, I think, just to get you started thinking about what, if you are serious about, like, there's a politician or a government official that you don't like or that's done something wrong, you don't have to wait until the next election. You now have an idea and thoughts and really a tool and a map of a process that is available to us voters. I didn't say it was going to be easy. I didn't say it would be not something that you would have to put a lot of time into. And obviously, to get all these signatures and do all this stuff, you have to have money too, right? To get all these signatures, it takes money because you got to go door to door. You got to do ads. You got to do political, stuff. You got to hire people, right? You got to, or you got to get volunteers. That's going to take time, money. So I'm not saying it's easy, but there is a path. Last thing I'll say is there's also two other tools that I do want to talk about, not today so much, but I do want to mention today that are important for us to think about in terms of like, how do you hold, I'm not even going to say accountable anymore. I'm going to say, how do you put consequences and impose consequences on government officials and politicians who do things that you don't like? So how do you act? So like, what are the tools available to you, right? You already know some tools, but yeah, what are these power tools? Thank you so much to my DJs and to my engineers back there. Thank you so much. So lastly, in these last few minutes, there's two things. There's 2 or 3 words that you need to know. So the first 2 words are ballot initiative. I'm going to stutter it. Ballot initiative. That's the first 2 words. And then the second and the last word is referendum. Okay? So ballot initiatives and referendums. Okay. So let's talk about the ballot initiative process, or what that is, or what is an initiative, what is a ballot initiative. Again, we're just going to mention it here, and then we'll come back to it. So, an initiative or ballot initiative process allows everyday citizens to propose new laws or new constitutional amendments. So, let's say you don't like. Let's say it's not the politician, or so like let's say it's not one politician that you have your eye on that you want to get fired or you want to have removed. But let's say it's a law that you don't like, or a constitutional amendment that you don't like, and you reached out to the senators and the assembly people, and they're not trying to hear you, and they just not paying attention to you, and you reach out to the city council people, and they don't want no parts of it. They did what they did, and they did it, and you don't like it, but they did it. So are you just SOL-ish out of luck? No, you're not, because the ballot initiative process allows everyday citizens to actually propose new laws, right? And actually get those new laws enacted, right? And it also allows us to propose new constitutional amendments, which are different than laws, right? The Constitution and the stuff inside the Constitution are not laws. They're different than laws. They govern the laws, right? So the laws have to agree with the Constitution. The Constitution is above the laws, right? So we have a process here where we can actually even make changes to the state constitution. I think California did that in a very big way, not too long ago, maybe some 15, 20 years ago. Actually, it's more now because it's 2021. So, but I like in the late 90s, right? When, when we amended our constitution, we by ballot initiative changed our state constitution to outlaw affirmative action. That's something that we did by ballot initiative, by actual changing the state constitution. So, and the voters of California did that. That wasn't something that happened in the state Senate or the state assembly. The voters did that. Okay, and the last thing I want to mention, the last power tool that I want to mention, the last political power tool is the referendum. Okay? The referendum. So the referendum process allows citizens to refer a law that passed the legislature to the ballot for voters to decide whether to uphold or repeal a law. So a referendum is sort of like the reverse of a ballot initiative. So the ballot initiative lets us propose new stuff. The referendum lets us take down old stuff that we don't like. Okay. So these are 2 other power tools that we have to put consequences on politicians when we don't like what they do, or government officials when we don't like what they do. It's the ballot initiative, it's the referendum, and as you just saw, a very big, very expensive example of the recall. All right, so let's stop here. That'll do it for today's TPG. You got a lot of games, you got a lot of info. Hey, this is so much better than watching Meet the Press, isn't it? I mean, is Chuck Todd going to say what I just said to you? No disrespect to Chuck Todd, but is he going to explain to you how you can use the political tools you have to change your government? No. Okay. Is what they're doing on CNN right now in the morning going to tell you about how Black voters voted and why it's important for Black voters to define accountability and actually use it? No. So that's why you want to be here at TPG every Sunday morning, 10 a.m. Check us out. We are right here on ETM Media Group. Once again, like, share, subscribe. Leave a comment too. Check us out in the chat. Leave a message. All right. What does accountability mean to you? What does that mean to you? And what do you think about how Black voters did for the governor this year? What do you think? All right. So with that, it's Chris, TPG, ETM, and with that, I'll see you next week.
I am the greatest.
I'm a goat, I'm that goat, I'm an undisputed